We don't know, the dealer's room closes, so 6 o'clock?
No, they changed it to 6:30s because of the situation. We actually got it changed.
Oh, good. Okay.
But we'll still probably won't do a full hour. We'll probably.
So we get it back to these both have.
So if anybody wants to go, oh my God, Mark Maddox is really interesting. I want to go see what kind of RV he's got so I can spend lots of money. Well, then you can't.
Both these guys have
That'll
tables
happen.
next
By
to
the-
each other.
The glazed look on everybody's face, I doubt that's gonna happen.
At the end of the day, they're on my, what do you Mark, man? So, this is, Mark Maddox, this is your life.
We have found every lover you've ever had.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And they're all up there in the front row.
You know, there have to be at least a couple women in here because of your kids.
Oh, I guess we should introduce ourselves. Dwayne, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Dwayne Todd. I am a publisher, writer, film-related items, as well as a few other things like being an engineer and a regulatory consultant. And I'm here as a friend of Mark and have great respect for him. I've known him for a long time. He actually, my wife and I, the first convention we went to about 10 years ago, we met him. He's like, you two are together, you're here at this convention, why aren't you two married? And literally, that was how we met him, and we kind of had a relationship.
He
going for a
says
long
these
time.
things a lot to
So,
people.
I'm sure he does. Everybody
You do
comes
that for
by.
me?
Everybody comes by. So.
I need to.
He's looking out for somebody.
Oh, okay.
He won't say who.
Shot here,
All right.
I'm Ted
That's
Haycraft.
nice, thank you.
Yeah, that's very nice. That's sweet. I mean, Ted Haycraft here.
Tender. Moving.
That's me.
I farted.
Wait, this better not go. This is the way.
Yeah, guys,
I
you
do
guys
have a
never
serious
raised
question.
Yeah, So, I work at NBC affiliate. I've been writing about movies off and on since
His name is Ted Haycraft, by the way.
Oh, Ted Haycraft. And I do a thing called Cinema Chat on air. I help out on a podcast called Phi Phenomenon. And and some other things. But we're here for Mark. So, Mark Maddox, the artist, the master.
Now I finally have nothing to say.
I have a question.
Oh, you have a question already?
AKA Bad Dog Maddox.
All right, anybody's got any questions?
I do, and
Yes.
serious, I think. When you were little, I assumed that. See, I have a serious question.
But I'm,
Oh,
okay.
it sounded like the question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
How did you learn that you had any kind of talent? I mean, did you just start sketching? What made you do it? What drew you to it?
Well, I mean, I drew like a little kid, when little kids are the first grader drawing, and then you kind of quit, where they say if you're in the first grade and the teacher walks in the first day and goes, how many of you kids in there are artists? Almost 100% raise their hands. The second year, it drops by a substantial margin until it finally gets down to the third, fourth, fifth grade, whatever it is, where like 2 people at the most are likely to raise their hands, which is a shame because society kind of pushes a lot of people away from that. So I drew in that kind of stick figure. Well, hell, I even did a stick figure of Mysterious Island with the crab and all that stuff when I was a little kid. But then I got real heavily into comic books and comic book collecting, and a gateway drug for comic book lovers to then become artists is Jack Kirby. And that is because you can look at his stuff and part of the brain can analyze it and go, oh, wait a minute. I mean, it's like he leaves a trail of breadcrumbs. I see how he drew that hand.
Trail of Kirby dots.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Kirby Crackle. And the thing is, if you look at it, you can see in some ways there how he drew a hand or a head or a person talking or whatever, and then you either copy it or I think I can try that. And that was for me and the neighborhood kids. We got together at the dining room table at my house with typewriter paper and ballpoint pens and pencils and stuff, and started either copying stuff we saw out of the newspaper or out of comic books, and then we started making our own stuff up. So was that the answer?
Yeah, that's an answer. And with the comic books, we all know Jack Kirby.
Do we? I was going to ask.
The king.
Does anybody know who Jack Kirby is? For the most part?
Anybody not know who Jack Kirby
I
is?
know he-
Comics.
You want to tell him or you want me to tell him?
Jen just said, he's in comics.
No, I said Marvel Comics.
Oh, Marvel Comics,
They say
okay.
DC too, because they did some.
Well, that's true, yeah.
To keep it really quick and short, he basically
He's the king.
he co-created most of the Marvel universe, practically the entire Marvel universe with Stanley. Stan was, it wasn't
And
Stan.
the look of all the characters.
Yeah, the look, everything, the movement and stuff. And he had a style of energy that he brought to, he basically, superhero language of comic books is due to him. So, anyway.
Well, I mean, he started off like some of the other really good comic book artists. He started off as an animator, and I think that rapid fire having to, he worked actually on Popeye cartoons, but as he did it, and you got to do, Popeye's throwing a punch. This, you got to draw this one, then you got to draw this one, then you got to draw this one. That's a lot of drawing.
Yes.
When you consider how, and he was good at cranking it out. When he went to the two-dimensional surface of the comic book, he was so good at it that he could draw. What was his the thing with the 7 pages a day, 6 pages a day, where everybody else did 1 or 2 if they were lucky.
He was a superstar already in the late
He was a
30s,
bulldozer
40s.
of comics.
Him and another partner named Jill Simon. It was before Stan Lee. But he was the kind of artist too that he didn't look at anything. He could just start drawing out of his head.
Yeah.
Draw a whole page.
But what happened? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
His question.
Okay, we know that Jack Kirby was a huge influence on your art.
Right.
And you were talking about comic book styles. Who was the least famous or least well-known artist that had a huge impact on your life that you could mention?
Lady living across the street. Mrs. Camerata. Her son, we were on the bus going to school, and I had just started buying comic books, 72, I think it was, and the kid got on the bus. I said, that's that new kid. And we were all sitting near the back of the bus, and he pulled out some drawings his mother had done from a Tarzan comic and from a Batman comic. And I'm like looking at that, and he goes, oh, my mom drew these for me. And so I brought it for show and tell, and I looked at that and I said, I looked at the kid, you're a liar. That I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, that somebody with a pencil stuff had actually done it. There wasn't any actual separate magic that guys did to create these images on comic. It literally was somebody with just a pencil and an eraser. What was interesting too is they were on regular lined paper. And so he goes, no, you can come over to the house and mom will show you. And so we hang out, we became friends, and then one time I spent the night over there, and all we did I brought over my Jack Kirby comics, and I started shoveling, draw that. And she sat there and just started just looking and doing, and she did when Neil Adams was still pretty fresh on Batman, Neil Adams Batman and Jack Kirby. I still have them. I kept them.
Nice.
All these years later, I still got them in a folder. I remember if I looked at them, we were clearing out some stuff the other day, probably less than 2 months ago, and I came across them. I'll never throw them out.
Could you say that this was the pivotal moment? That's by seeing her do that?
It's steps,
Okay.
because you got Kirby, you got
In terms of staying with it, not influences.
well,
In
it's
terms of staying doodling and drawing.
no, not yet. It was a few years later, like I said, when we were sitting around the dining room table, me and my buddies, and we were kind of egging each other on. Like at first it was, I just drew this Captain America piece or something, or like there'd be a Ray Harryhausen film on, like I remember, It Came From Beneath the Sea, and we said, we're gonna do an actual hand animated, It Came From Beneath the Sea cartoon. We had like a boat, we were drawing a boat going across from page to page, and then the octopus arm kind of comes up and wraps around the boat. Well, that was about it. That was about as far as we got with the cartoon, because we were tired after that. But there was things like that, and then but with that egging each other on, I was so grateful all these years later that I had those other two guys that were we were all improving and trying to top each other in a way. It wasn't really a competition. It was like every time you saw something better, you were excited. But you ended up drawing stuff to where you finally came up with your own comic books. And then one day, here's the tipping point, and I think I told you this before. I had drawn a Superman from the cover of Jimmy Olsen, the Big Boom,
Right.
where he's running. He's got Superman that literally has in his hands a runaway nuclear reactor, and he's flying away with it. And I drew the cover. It was drawn by Jack Kirby with ink by Neil Adams, and I just drew it in a sketchbook that I had just bought. And I handed it, my dad said, "What are you doing there?" And I handed it to him, he yells to his wife, "Joanne, did you see this? Do you see what our son is doing?" And she goes, "What?" And she thought I was, and he took it and "Look at this, what he did." And my dad, who was incredibly poor as a child, he was in Dust Bowl, Oklahoma. He had his own apartment at the age of 12 because his mother couldn't keep him, and he worked in the oil fields, and everything like that. Saw for the first time in one of his kids something that was not going to let them be a day laborer of normal, and he really loved it. And so anytime there was any kind of way to bump me towards, like in school, it's like, make sure you take the art classes, take the art high school, take the art classes.
That's great parents there, because a lot of them don't want you to go that route.
But I was drawing and then I got into Star Trek, so that had me start drawing realistic things. That was around 74, pulp magazines and stuff. And then the great James Bama came into my life with his Doc Savage book covers. And then also his Monsterama and Puzzle Go-Go's. And I wasn't as much as Frazetta. Frazetta came later for me. Most people, he's earlier. And I think he is fantastic, but he wasn't my guy. Bama was my guy. And so around the time I got out of high school, day I graduated, get home, well, I guess I'm gonna cruise for a while here. Lay down on the couch, my dad walks in the room, he goes, "Oh, no. I know you're supposed to start college in 3 months, but for right now, you're going to art school over at the tech center, because you're not gonna sit around for 3 months," and all that kind of stuff. So I said, "Oh God." So I got up, went to this school, and this guy was an old school kind of guy. His hero was Milton Caniff, Terry and the Pirates, and Steve Canyon, that people would know. And he looked at me, and the guy immediately called me a punk. Like when I came through the door, I failed the test to get into the school because my math score was so low, but he saw my portfolio and said, "Let that kid in anyway." He come in the door, I come in the door, and he goes, "Come into my office." And he goes, "You're some young punk who likes to drive up and down the streets in a hot rod, aren't you?" I said, "No, sir, I don't have a driver's license yet." And he goes, "Oh well." So anyway, well, I love the guy because he was hardcore old Chicago art school, art studio, illustrator, graphic artist, and all that kind of stuff. And he was different. He seemed like just an old crusty old bastard, but he really was. When he saw talent or something like that, he would very subtly bump you in certain directions and stuff. But to this day, I feel like I owe him and my father a massive debt. And then my dad, 3 months later, said, "Okay, you did this long enough. Time to go to college, and then when you're done with college, you can come back to this school and finish this up." And I said, "No way, I'm not leaving this school." So I split the time up and finished college and both of them together. But that was it. And then started getting art jobs and stuff like that. But then, so.
I was just watching the Frazetta documentary just recently. He had an old crush mentioned guy that was a mentor and then really died on him. So it would have been almost
that was almost a classical artist kind of guy though.
Okay.
He wanted him to go to Italy and,
Right.
go to the Louvre and be painting all those paintings that are sitting there.
We never had one of those Lancer paperback ones.
So did you move into like the science fiction, the types of drawings that you're doing now? How did you get into those from the beginning?
Well, it's weird because I always loved monster movies, and I've told this story 1,000 times about my first issue of Famous Monsters, and my mother wouldn't buy it for me. She was buying it for my brother, so I almost dropped to the floor of the store and kicking and screaming, "I want it." And she said, "I'll buy you the next issue." And that kind of thing. There was monsters, there was science fiction films, moved back from Europe, Germany, which was not showing much of this stuff. Few Irwin Allen shows and stuff, and then you get to the United States, and you people in this country do not know how good you had it. I came in, I thought, the first day I'm here, Friday night, and then there's a thing, my brother's looking through a TV guide, he goes, "There's like this whole thing of Saturday morning cartoons where there's a show called Johnny Quest, and there's a show called The Herculoids, and there's a show called, and I'm like, what's it? And then he goes, and then there's this show that I used to watch before called The Outer Limits is on in the afternoon, and there's a King Kong cartoon, and then there's a Monster movie, there's a Batman TV series, there's a Green Hornet television show, Man from U.N.C.L.E. We knew about that in Europe, but it was like all this stuff, and then color TV. The first thing that my uncle goes over to the television set and turns the TV set on. The first thing that shows up is a guy being held in the grip of a pair of pliers, and it was an ad for Land of the Giants. And I was like, what the hell is this, you know? And it's like, I said, every day is Christmas in the United States. So, and then I didn't know, so for the next like year and a half while we lived in South Dakota, which by the way, we left there and we were driving across country to get to my dad's next post in Ellsworth Air Force Base in Rapid City. And we're in a hotel room, and it's the middle of the day, and the soap operas are on, and there's a guy walking through the woods with a shotgun, and this werewolf jumps out, and the guy with the shotgun goes like this. I'm like, what's this? And my mother goes, it's called a soap opera, and I go, ooh, I like soap opera. Little did I know that from then on it was like, oh, there's another one coming on right after that called The Edge of Night or something. I'm like, what is like somebody laying in bed dying of a disease and the nurse is kissing the doctor where nobody's, I mean, it wasn't the same thing. So, but Dark Shadows was Aces, moved to South Dakota, and then all of a sudden start seeing all these monster movies, one right after the other. I mean, like boom, boom, boom. Saw Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein on the same night for the first time. Saw War of the Worlds, saw The Time Machine, saw Mysterious Island. Bam, man, it's like somebody just took my head, took the top off, and just ladled this crap into my skull. And that's why I'm up here today talking to you. And it's one of the reasons that's my muse that you see in there on the thing. You know.
So we're gonna
Answer that.
Kind of.
I would love to spend more time on the influences and more of your younger career, but for the sake of brevity and doing some closing down stuff, let's go. Let's walk through a process here. Dwayne, would you show this? This is you want to tell them what this is. We're going to walk through the process of you two getting together and what the process is.
He asked me out.
Yeah, it was a good night.
And some of your technique.
So a few years ago, I had this idea. Buckaroo Banzai is a long-time project, a long-time passion of mine, the film and all the aspects of the film. And so I started working on a book about how they, what do I write about that has not been written about? Because I've read an enormous amount, and I have a lot of memorabilia, posters, developmental materials. And I'd never seen anything written about how they marketed the movie domestically, internationally, how they did different things in different countries. And so I started working through that, and I decided I was going to write the book that I wanted to buy and put on my shelf. And I don't care if anybody else wants the book or not. This is going to be my book. I want a great cover. I want a legitimate cover. And the first person that came to mind is Mark, because he does such great, the vibrant colors, the pieces that come in there. And I'm like, I want a picture that Mark has done of Buckaroo Banzai hanging on my wall. And so this is my opportunity to do that. So worked on a number of interviews and things like that, publishing the book, engaged with Mark. And Mark did a fantastic job. I was super happy with his work. And
thank you.
How did the process? What was the process?
He told me he wanted to cover, and I said, okay.
That's it?
I don't remember if we really got to. We knew that there was going to be certain elements. I think
so. We
go ahead.
Did you go back?
We had a couple of conversations about what the layout would look like, and then you started extorting me. You said I need the latest copy of the Blu-ray. The shop version.
That's standard operating procedure.
Sure. So anyway, so we started funneling information, which I found very interesting, and I will let you talk about that. But the amount of research you did surprise me, and you were like, well, if you've got some images, send those to me, like behind the scenes stills So I did send some of those, and I made a mistake. First mistake I made was sending you pictures of other people's art. You're like, I don't want to look at that.
Yeah, no point.
But because I was like, well, I want something that looks different. You know, it doesn't look like this or like that. And, you know, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I was already a huge fan of the movie. I've told this story to Dwayne enough times he's going to fall asleep in a few seconds I retell it, is that there was a thing in the newspaper about this movie that had come out that week, and the guy reviewing it said, look, this movie is of a certain type, but he dug it. He was like, this is such a cool little movie. You guys got to. So my brother and I are bored. Let's go on over to the theater. Movie starts up, and about 10 minutes in, me and him looked at each other in the dark and go, oh yeah, we got this. We understand this movie, this humor, and everything. And so I loved it. It was a great movie. And but when I started talking to Dwayne about it, at first it was like, okay, how much labor is going to go into this to where, you know, I mean, if we literally did everything that was, if we're going to do, well, we also got to get Jeff Goldblum with the cowboy hat. We got to get, you know, Christopher Lloyd, the handsome, what's his face? What's his?
Mr. Perfect.
Mr. Perfect. All that kind of perfect timing, yeah. And it was like, and all that kind of stuff. I said, and how much is that going to cost? It's going to be like, well, this many $1,000. And
There's a back cover. We'll drop that cover.
So I was sort of like, well, okay, and I do this a lot with especially with like Blu-ray covers. They were doing them about, especially started about 10 years ago, maybe 15, where an artist who loved the film would do the cover, but they would throw everything from the film into the cover. So if you have a movie like, what was the one, I remember this one was a real offender. They're well drawn.
The Carpenter.
No, the Carpenter cover, what's the one where the guys are, it's kind of a quasi rip-off of Deliverance, a good movie, where they're down in there and the Cajuns are fighting.
Boondock Saints? No.
No, the Cajuns are fighting with the Weekend
Oh,
Warriors.
that's Southern Comfort.
Oh,
Southern Comfort.
Yes.
And everybody from that film is on that cover, and I'm like, and from a distance, it looked like Jackson Pollock. So I started thinking about this, and there were other people sending me stuff, and they wanted everything from a film, and I said, you can have people going into the store and seeing that, and they're just going to go right past it, because from that distance, it looked like a Technicolor yawn. It was just, all. And so I said, let's back this down to what's most important. In this case, we know Buckaroo's important, we know Pretty's important, and the next thing would be John Lithgow. The car, the spaceship, and God, would I want to put everybody else in the film in there? But once again, even that's a busy cover, but it's not too busy, I hope. I don't know, you tell me, something in the back of my mind. But you know, to me, I wanted to get the flavor of the film, but I didn't want to sit there and make a grocery list of why the film is great, you know, and that was part of it. There's some of the stuff that doesn't exist. Penny Pretty never posed like that.
Who posed for that?
A friend of mine. So there was, and then for me, that's that Dr. Lizardo, that's me. You know, because I wanted to do those gloves. You know, I wanted to do those fingers with those gloves and everything like that. And then the car. I mean, just shots from the film, spaceships.
Well,
I don't know.
one of the things you were trying to figure out what all the decals on the car were.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to find a picture with that. And I actually have a model kit, and it has a strip of all the decals, which is one of the most useful things. So I
Right.
sent you the decals that kind of show where all, you know, you can see each one of them clearly.
Yeah.
And so you nail, even though you kind of got to get up close to see it, all these little bitty screen accurate, right on the money for the jet car.
I've had once or twice. I really try to get those little details in it. And the irony is, even I know sometimes when I'm doing it, is that something is going to cover it up, or there's going to be somebody's elbow from another shot getting in the way of all this stuff I sweated. In this case, the car's got so much dust and dirt flying off of it because it's racing through the desert that, yeah, they're there, And I painted every damn one of them totally perfect, but then I put a bunch of dust and dirt on top of it, and it evaporated. I was sweated the metals on John Lithgow, but in the end, it was sort of like, eh.
So what are the tools did you use on that?
You mean what did I do?
Yeah.
Corel Painter and Photoshop, but mostly Corel Painter, because it has a kind of a buttery quality. I build my own brushes and all that kind of stuff, but I like a kind of an oily sort of effect to it, which basically when you brush with it using a pressure sensitive tablet, you actually get strokes and
So
streaks.
you're digitally doing this?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so did you start out, were you part of the pre-digital age when you started this?
Oh, yeah, I mean, there are some of them that I do, like you've seen a few of them over there. I've got more in the stack, and I got 3 or 4 at the house. But it's literally when you've got, I don't know how much time I spent on this one. Maybe, this one was a little bit labor intensive. I'm gonna say 3 weeks of it. And that's after research.
So one of the things that impressed me, because I'll be right up front, I've never hired a professional artist to do a professional cover, was the amount of research you did and how you did that. I mean,
Well, there's
share a
things
little bit
that
how you do that. And you said that's how you do it.
I'm Captain Anal. I mean, that's all. That didn't come out right.
Don't say that.
Captain Anal.
Game now.
Jim's writing Captain Anal.
Yeah, that's a new nickname.
Yeah.
It's the camera,
I'm on.
Maybe Captain Detail would be.
But I do.
No, Captain Angel's much better.
Yeah.
You wish. And with all my covers, I'm like that. I mean, I have to. What was the one I was working on the other day? Linda gets called over for to talk about animal reference, and I shouldn't be talking about this now because it's not been announced. But I'm doing Hammer did their own version of their Scarecrow of Romney Marsh.
Oh, good.
Right, and so I got the job to do the cover, but I'm like, holy crap, there's like a whole bunch of horses and guys with skeleton things on it. There's a marsh and there's another scarecrow, blah, blah, blah. So I go, Linda, come here, what are these kind of horses? And they're Morgan horses, and there's a black one there, just take a Morgan horse and paint it black. And so I was literally, I get down into this minutia with almost everything.
But don't you think because of the style you're doing your art, photorealism, that you have to go that route?
You have to. The fans will crucify you. There's been a couple of times I haven't gotten it right. I got close. I've had somebody go, the airplane you got there wouldn't fire that from that position and all that kind of stuff. That kind of thing. And they're right. It's like, well, then maybe you should have been there when I was trying to put this thing together, because I try. But if the crab from Mysterious Island, there's pictures of it. I got the Blu-ray. I can take screen captures all I want. But still, I want to know, what is that crab? What kind of crab is that? I don't want to,
So you have these parameters, whereas like your heroes, Jack Kirby or Frank Rosetta, they had a realistic foundation originally, but they are much looser. They can go and cheat a little bit, whereas you can't really afford to cheat.
No.
So you're strong.
And you went back, watched it multiple times.
Well, the thing that was really good,
Okay.
really, really good, is that first time my kids are there at the house with me, and I break that cellophane off that box, and I go, thanks, Dwayne. But we watched it. I watched it many, many times, and the first 2 or 3 passes. The first pass is just for fun, again, and watching a nice crystal clear picture. Who was it that put that one on? I can't remember, but.
Chow Factory.
Well, the Chow Factory,
Yeah.
and they did a really good job. And then I watched all the extras, and I also even watch extras on films while I'm working on it, like Creature from the Black Lagoon, all that stuff. Tom Weaver was in the background talking about where this was filmed and that was filmed and all that. Saturate yourself with the subject matter. But with this one, it was the same thing. I watched it multiple times, and I'll give you a few things. Like I said, she did not pose for this. but I had to get the dress right. So I'm here looking at the way that the tassels fall, all that kind of stuff, yellow shoes, all that sort of stuff. With him, this is actually a shot of him from a scene in the movie where he's been in I don't remember whether he's running or fighting or something, and he's very sweaty. So I'm like, any part when I'm painting, instead of mimicking the gloss little dots that would be on his face, I just leave that out. And then I looked at his hair from when he wasn't running and fighting and all that kind of stuff, and his hair was nice and poofed, and I just painted that on there instead. And that wasn't even his shoulders, that was from multiple things of a guy wearing just a regular suit. And then I made sure I got the tie right, and then I painted the tie on. But I mean, if you were running the film, you wouldn't know that that was from that. But so yes, and that's just on that one element of all of this. So, and then there's a bunch of stuff. You'd be stunned if you saw some of the things I did for movies where I have left out, like the movie The Lost Continent, you know, the Hammer film where they go. That movie, I had so many dozens of different items and elements and stuff that I ended up throwing the whole thing out because it got too frustrating and just painting big busty woman, crab monster. the publisher said, perfect. But I had all the actors in there. Susanna Lee, who had been here, I had her in it. I had, who was the lead in that one? The guy from Hands of the Ripper. Eric, I forget his name, really good British actor. For first episode of Masterpiece Theater, it was him playing Soames. Anyway, so yeah, sometimes it'll drive you mad. Compositions will drive you nuts. Sometimes the compositions take longer than the painting. There was one that I did this year, I can't remember which one it was, and I spent almost 3 weeks just trying to decide where the elements were going to go. And Linda's like, are you doing okay with that? It's like, no, I'm not. You know?
So when you have this right here and Dwayne's here, how did you guys come up with this layout? What was the genesis of this layout?
It's kind of happy.
Well, and
He's got an
I
answer.
kick myself because I can't remember. You had done another a Blu-ray cover. It had Peter Cushing. It was Monster that has this kind of panels.
Yeah, I
was
wanted
like
to
a
do
panel
panels
layout.
with this one, so I didn't have to fight with
And
that overlapping, that sort of, I can do it sometimes, but when you've got larger elements and smaller elements, sometimes too intermixed,
yeah,
it isn't like you can, some people, I'll do something big, like here's a big Peter Cushing head, and then behind him is the monster from the film in the distance, and then further back is, you know,
Kind
some
of a
other,
loose montage.
yeah, a loose montage, but sometimes you really want to be able to just not have to think about that. In this case, this is a little bit more, not that this style that mine looks like. Does anybody remember the artist Amsel, who used to do like TV guide covers? He did the John Wayne poster, for incredible poster. I was talking with somebody today. Look at the poster for the movie called The Shootist, the John Wayne film. If you look at that, he makes little boxes, and he puts Ron Howard in there, and Lauren Bacall there, and Jimmy Stewart, and then he puts this flowery little boxes, and then there's the town, and then the big front thing is John Wayne with the gun in the front. I love that poster. And that was more like this. This was more like, let's have fun and plug things in.
well, I remember seeing the other one and saying I really like that because obviously Buckaroo Banzai's a comic book in the movie.
Right.
And it's not a comic book, but it almost has a little bit of that flavor to it. So.
Yeah, it's got the panel look to it, right?
And then kind of talked through, you know, the different aspects, where the gazes were going. I remember having that conversation, so.
Mm-hmm.
You were cautious to make sure that they weren't, you know, completely gazing in a lurid manner.
Yeah, I
You
really
didn't want
did.
the-
I
you
didn't
didn't want
want
the eye
this.
gaze
He
to
was
go
up a little
low.
higher, and I'm like, whoa.
When I first saw it,
But that's the thing with dealing with like a combination of two-dimensional and three-dimensional. There's a million people that wouldn't look at it. One time, and I'm like, I did not post this picture, somebody else did, and they did it wrong. I did a cover for a DVD of Hammer Monster movies. The pictures like this, trim marks are further out, so the artwork is actually drawn out to here, then cropped to here. And if it was cropped properly, the way it should have been, this would not be something closer to the closer into the image. There's a werewolf, there's a vampire, there's a this, there's a that, there's a mummy, and the guy wanted a little bit of a castle effect in the background, so I painted a castle and a candle in the background, lit candle. behind the mummy's shoulder, some guy from Britain goes, "Oi, that looks like a stiff one that's really dripping." And I'm like, and this is like a fairly well-known British film historian. So I went, and it was like, I posted a Buck Rogers rocket ship. I said, "This is a rocket ship." Posted a picture of a train. "This is a train." Posted a picture of a submarine. "This is a submarine. None of them are a penis, and neither is that candle." That's where your mind is going. So it's like, I think somebody wrote me later and said he was gay, and I was like, oh boy. But it was one of those things where you're sort of like, you know, get your mind out of the gutter. But still, you have to be a little careful.
Did
I appreciate that.
Did you ever see the font for the title? Is that
It's
you?
yours. You were all, you came up with it.
Yeah, I don't, I mean, I guess, maybe that would have been a found font, I think.
Yeah,
Maybe it could have been a Buckaroo Banzai font. Are you sure? I can't, you sure you didn't find? Okay.
So we talked about
That's
using
fine.
a similar font, but you came out with the whole design.
I think that's pretty close to the Buckaroo.
It is.
Look. Yeah. So,
So anyway, like I said, we're gonna not,
let's not truncate it to the point. What
Yeah.
time is it now?
it is,
It's almost 10 hours.
so I wanted to go,
Oh,
I want to
so
open up
about
the
5 more
questions.
minutes or
Yeah,
something.
I wanna-
Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, that's the main thing, I want to make sure that you.
Don't all raise your hands at once.
Do you prefer doing digital or going back to like watercolor?
If I
oil?
could do everything in tradition, I probably would. Just because I've done enough of this, it was really fun.
What would be,
but not
what would be your
necessarily.
favorite medium as
The-
far as, like oil, watercolor?
I'm actually fairly new. I used to paint in oil when I was doing like more fine art, like and stuff like that. And I'm just now getting back into it as an illustrative way. There's a very fast drying oil paint that Alkids is the name of them. And you can use it in tandem with regular oils, and I've been using those a little bit lately, so I think I could probably see myself really picking that up and going. Acrylics are a pain in the rear end in a lot of ways. Gouache is an excellent one. Gouache is a thick, opaque watercolor that was used for decades by movie poster artists. And it's actually, to me, if you were ever training anybody to start them down the road of painting, I would recommend that, because I've seen people do beautiful paintings, their first painting ever with gouache, just because of the way it handles. So I don't know, actually that's my answer. I don't know yet. Talk to me in 5 years.
So you always answer.
Any other questions or observations?
Did your father live long enough to see you become really successful in that?
No,
No?
no, he died really young. He died at the age of 56, contracted a brain tumor from Agent Orange. So yeah, he was in Da Nang where they were spraying a lot of it. And yeah, they the military, I thought it was one of those things with military, that didn't happen. But they were like, yeah, it happened to a lot of guys. So yeah. When he left, I had done some art jobs, and then I was doing a photography job at the state, and that's what he saw. And I wish he had, but you know, I wish he could have seen my kids too, you know, but and stuff like that. But
What about your mother?
my mom's very happy about it.
Oh,
Yeah, she's very, very happy about it. So.
You guys, your mother, you talk about the times when you were like crying about the Famous Monsters cover and what it led to.
Here's a bit of that. My brother, you're gonna love this, Ted. You're gonna love. My brother comes over to the house with these giant, now modern Marvel books and shows them to her, and she's just like looking like, what the hell are you showing this to me for? But it's those big hardbound volume omnibuses. But he went out and bought her because my mother bought the very first issue of the comic with Wonder Woman in it. She bought it off the rack as a little kid, and then my brother's now telling her nowadays what it's worth. It's like, yeah, you can buy your house now for what that comic book's worth. But he went out and bought her the omnibus of the Golden Age Wonder Woman.
And
I think I'm gonna steal it from her when she's not looking. She ain't gonna read it.
What does she do with it? Is it sitting?
Just sitting in the house. I'm like, I'm just waiting for her just to look the other way. But yeah, I mean, but she goes over there and explains to her what some of the stuff that she bought us as kids is either now worth or what status it's got and all that kind of stuff. And she, I mean, she finds it somewhat interesting. But it's all kind of ties into her understanding. She hated Doctor Who. She used to call Doctor Who Dr. Y. And it was like, and then I started making money doing Doctor Who art. She goes, "Oh, I love Doctor Who."
So, how do you feel where your career is at this point? In terms of, you think you're at a good place that you're doing like Blu-ray and DVD covers? Is that what you, or would it be your goal would be to do some movie one sheets? Of course, that style's not vogue.
I think it's coming. I'm seeing some of it coming back.
Coming back, yes.
Yeah, I would do that. I'd do anything. I mean, I rock. When we were kids and we were in art school, the things you wanted to do was movie posters, album covers, and comic books, and all that kind of stuff. There was all that general stuff. So I've had some of that. It's funny. Some guy wrote me today, Jim, and said, "I'm a musician, all that kind of stuff, and I listened to you on Monster Attack, and I wanted to talk about it. I didn't get a chance to finish reading it because I was running to a panel, but I think he was like going to say, I want you to do an album cover for me, or it would be a CD or something. But vinyl's back, though, and album covers are coming back, so I was like, well,
Think about Dean
I'll let
Motter.
you know what he says.
Dean Motter, one of the guests here, he did a ton of album covers and won some Juno Awards because of them. So is that something you would love to do, an album cover?
I'd like to do album covers. To me, the great album cover people was it, am I saying it right? Hypnosis, however you called them. The 10cc album cover with the guy coming in the diving suit coming out of the water with the woman in the dress, that kind of thing. I mean, all that stuff those guys were doing back at the time was so inventive. Illustrations, what's the Alice Cooper cover by Drew Struzan, was with the Only Women Bleed song on it. Welcome to my Nightmare?
Welcome to my nightmare.
It is Welcome to My Nightmare. That's a great album cover, but there's thousands of those. So yeah, it's all on the table. And then one of these days, I'm going to be like, you know what? I'm done doing stuff for other people, unless I'll cherry pick, and then I'm going to do stuff just for me,
Well, getting back to your roots, would you ever consider doing some kind of narrative story, a graphic novel of some sort?
I did one or two, and it's like, oh my God. I wasn't very good at it, and people told me I wasn't either. I did some kind of 4 or 5 page precursor to Dracula AD 1972 in an issue of Little Shop of Horrors, and man, I caught hell for that.
What was the hell you caught?
It was just like, it really didn't, and I don't remember. It's been over a decade, but it was like it wasn't very liked. I'll tell you this, I will show you sometime. I've got about 12 pages of a Shandu the Magician comic that I started working on. And I think that's pretty good. But do I want to do it? Those guys do not get paid enough. They don't get paid enough, they don't get enough respect. And so the answer would be no, I wouldn't want to do it. Although, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see a Mark Maddox graphic novel. Any other questions or observations or input? Yes, sir.
I'll just say that I've known Mark probably for 12 years now.
Yeah, what's your name?
Robert Smith.
You a musician? You wanted me to do an album cover?
No, but Mark had a great influence on my son, who's just now finishing up art school.
Yeah, right.
And Mark used to, every time he'd be sitting at a table drawing, Mark would come by. And you just brought up Corral. And in one of the panels, he was maybe 11, 12, and you said Corral painter.
Yeah.
And the minute we got home, ordered him this first thing of Corral painter, worked with it. Second year, because first year's just straight up. Second year, they start digital. And he got in a knockdown, drag out fight with an instructor because they would not let him use Corel. And he said, I can't remember which one he was using. It was Corel and the other thing. And he said, the other one's crap. I can't do with that what I can do with Corel.
Corel is the closest thing in a computer having the visceral feel of using paint. That when you, as a matter of fact, I swear there's sometimes when I'm using it, that I go, there's not gonna be hardly any transition other than cleaning your brushes and trying not to spill a cup of water or whatever between that and putting the paint down on the paper. It's got, but I mean, I build my own brushes exactly the way I want them to react and feel and all that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why those guys wouldn't let him do it. Did they say it wasn't any good?
No, they didn't say it wasn't good, they just said that this isn't what we use here. And he fought with them, and finally they just relented and let him use it.
Well,
And
good.
did
good.
some terrific work with it.
I mean, I know art teachers that have got brains, some of them don't. But you watch an art teacher who observes what their student is doing and go, okay, how do I push them further in the direction that they're going? We had a horrible art teacher when we were in high school. And it's funny, I still got connected. My girlfriend, when we were in high school back then, we were in the same art class. My buddy Bert Salz, who's out there working on Marvel movies and stuff now, we were in art class. And she made fatal mistakes sometimes to kill the forward momentum of somebody who was starting to be creative. Did the opposite of what she was supposed to be doing. And there was a guy named Roy Rowland, and he could take a jar of ink and a dip quill pen or a dip pen and sit there, and he would draw these entire incredible drawings without even putting down pencils first. He was doing cartooning that looked like you had penciled it and then inked it and all that stuff. And he was doing it, and it was our last year in class of 4 years, 4 years. And it was the last couple of weeks of class, and he was there doing something, and it's like, man, he is so good. I have a stack of his stuff at the house. And she comes by and she goes, that wasn't the assignment I told you to do. I need you to do this, and that kind of stuff. And he put the ink down, and he put the jar down, and he pushed the paper aside. He goes, that's it. I'm done ever doing any of this ever again. This means nothing to me anymore, and I'm finished. And that was it. Got up and walked out. Never drew again. And he was excellent at it. Killed it.
Well, on that note, killed it.
And then everybody committed suicide.
6:18. So I think these guys let it go and wrap their table
If
up.
anybody wants to come on by, I'll be there for that big 10 minutes.
And I have a trivia question. Who was the comic book artist that he mentioned that he really liked?
Kirby, you mean?
Kirby.
I need to explain the reason behind this. So,
I gotta come up with another
Come
question.
on, trivia question.
All right, well, better than this, let me ask the
okay, you
question.
have a trivia question for him?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Who was the name of the actual illustrator, painter that I said I liked?
Oh,
That was Obama, right? Bama or Obama, I don't know how you say it.
Obama, the president.
No. No.
Yes, it was Obama.
Well, I saw that on Facebook, so that's
She got it, she got it.
yeah.
No, I don't need one. Take
You
that
don't need-
out.
okay.
Let me see that real quick. What is that?
Who hasn't got one of these?
Who doesn't have one? That's a trivia question. Who doesn't have one of these?
There you
You
go.
want it, Jim?
Jim, give it to Jim.
Give it to Jim. Sean, do you want it? Where the hell are all these books coming from? Just hand it to him.
It's a sideshow.
So, thanks a lot. Let's give Mark a hand.
Thank you so much.
Be sure to go by the tables, they're next to each other, and check out the.
Yeah, we're together. We're doing Chang and Aang.
And these prints are free with the purchase of a book exclusively at the show.
Now, I've never seen, I want to ever, turn your head this way. Look out that way.
Why?
Turn your head that way.
Okay.
And this is hair. He looks like an extra from Amadeus, doesn't he?
The longest my hair has ever been on
I
my
know, it looks kind of cool.
William Clark.
After the colonial period, you know, he's a.
Yeah, really.